जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन। यामुनतीरवनचारी। यामुनतीरवनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन। यामुनतीरवनचारी। मुनतीरवनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्रीमद् चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि 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 बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 2, text number 36. I need the book, if the book is around. Tatra ha preta bandhunam ashrutya paridevitam aha tan balako bhutva yama svayam upagataha. Sorry. Tatraha pretabandhunam ashrutya paridevitam ahatan balako bhutva yamasvayam upagataha. Tatraha pretabandhunam ashrutya paridevitam ahatan balako bhutva yamasvayam upagataha. Tatraha pretabandhunam ashrutya paridevitam ahatan balako bhutva yamasvayam upagataha.
Ashritya paridevitam ahatan balako bhutva yamasvayam upagataha. Ashritya paridevitam ahatan balako bhutva yamasvayam upagataha.
Anybody else? Online?
Yes, Prabhu. Tatraha preta bandhunam ashrutya paridevitam ahatan balako bhutva yama swayam upagataha.
Tatra, there. Ha, certainly. Preta bandhunam, of the friends and relatives of the dead king. Ashrutya, hearing. Paridevitam, the loud lamentation. So loud that it could be heard from the planet of Yamaraj. Aha, said. Dan, unto them, the lamenting queens. Balakaha, a boy. Bhutva, becoming. Yamaha, Yamaraj, the superintendent of death. Svayam, personally. Upagataha, after coming. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So I'm going to read this verse and I'll also read the next verse because they're somewhat linked. While the queens were lamenting for the dead body of the king, their loud cries were heard even from the abode of Yamaraj. Assuming the body of a boy, Yamaraj personally approached the relatives of the dead body and advised them as follows. Purport. Sometimes the living entity is forced to give up his body and enter another one according to the judgment of Yamaraj. It is difficult, however, for the conditioned soul to enter another body unless the present dead body is annihilated through cremation or some other means. The living being has attachment for the present body and does not want to enter another, and thus in the interim he remains a ghost. If a living being who has already left his body has been pious, Yamaraj, just to give him relief, will give him another body. Since the living being in the body of the king had some attachment to his body, he was hovering as a ghost, and therefore Yamaraj, as a special consideration, approached the lamenting relatives to instruct them personally. Yamaraj approached them as a child because a child is not restricted, but is granted admittance anywhere, even to the palace of a king. Besides this, the child was speaking philosophy. People are very much interested in hearing philosophy when it is spoken by a child. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Next verse. Shri Yama Uvacha. Well, I guess I can just chant it. Shri Yama Uvacha. Aho Amisham Vyasad. Aho Amisham Vayasadikanam Vipashyatam Lokavidim Vimohaha Yatragatas Tatragatam Manusham Svayam Sadharma Apishochantyappartham Apartham. Sorry. Shri Maharaj said, "Alas, how amazing it is! These persons who are older than me have full experience that hundreds and thousands of living entities have taken birth and died. Thus they should understand that they are also apt to die. Yet still, they are bewildered. The conditioned soul comes from an unknown place and returns after death to that same unknown place. There is no exception to this rule, which is conducted by material nature. Knowing this, why do they uselessly lament?" Purport. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 2.28, "Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata avyakta nidhanan yeva tatraka paridevana." All created beings are manifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when they are annihilated. So what is the need for lamentation? Accepting that there are two classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul and the other not believing in its existence, there is no cause for lamentation in either case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by followers of the Vedic wisdom. Yet, even if for argument's sake we accept the atheistic theory, there is still no cause for lamentation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifested before creation. From this subtle state of unmanifestation comes manifestation. Just as from ether, air is generated, from air, fire is generated, from fire, water is generated, and from water, earth becomes manifested. From the earth, many varieties of manifestations take place. For example, a big skyscraper is manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as atoms in the ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but in the course of time, things are manifested and unmanifested. That is the difference. Then what cause is there for lamentation, either in manifestation or unmanifestation? Somehow or other, even in the unmanifested stage, things are not lost. Both at the beginning and at the end, all elements remain unmanifested, and this does not make any real material difference. If we accept the Vedic conclusion as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Antavanta ime deha, that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, nityasyokta sharirinaha, but that the soul is eternal, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king, but when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor seated on the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. Therefore, in either case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation for the loss of the body. In the Mahabharata, it is said, "Adarshanad iha yata punascha darshanam gataha." This statement could support the theory of the atheistic scientists that the child in the womb of a mother has no life but is simply a lump of matter. To follow this theory, if the lump of matter is aborted by surgical operation, no life is killed. The body of the child is like a tumor, and if a tumor is operated upon and thrown away, no sin is involved. The same argument could be put forward in regard to the king and his queens. The body of the king was manifested from an unmanifested source, and again it became unmanifested from manifestation. Since the manifestation exists only in the middle, between the 2 points of unmanifestation, why should one cry for the body manifested in the interim? Om ajnanatimirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. So now we are hearing Hiranyakashipu is speaking to the wives. This is all a part of the setup to the Lila of Lord Nrsimhadev. So we're hearing now about how Hiranyakashipu, his background and why he's so angry at Lord Vishnu, namely because Lord Vishnu in the form of Varahadev killed his brother, Hiranyaksha. So now Hiranyakashipu, in order to, this is a bit of a flashback, so now Hiranyakashipu, in order to pacify the wives of Hiranyaksha, is now narrating the story of Maharaj Suyagnya, who is a pious king who died untimely, and he's narrating the you could say the pastime, I guess, of his wives lamenting over his body. And so now, in the course of this narration, Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, as Prabhupada puts it, has now come on the scene, and he's about to speak knowledge to them. He's about to try to pacify them, pacify their lamentation. So, in this first verse, it's mentioned, Prabhupada mentions in the purport how if somebody is pious, well, first he mentions how the body is such an intense attachment. It's such an entangling thing. Because the body is our interface with this world. Our body is the way that we interact with this world. And from this body, from the type of body that we have, we develop a certain kind of identification. I forget who was describing, I think Dharma Setu was describing in class on Tuesday, how this ahankar, or false ego as it's translated, is the glue which binds the living entity to the material world. And this ahankar, this word is actually very interesting. It literally means aham, which means me or I, and kara, which means to make or to create. It can also mean to do or to engage with. But so ahankar literally means I making. The process of making different me's, of all these different identities that we have. And largely, they're based on the body, the particular body one has. And so it's a very strong attachment, the body, because with the body comes the false ego, comes all these different things. One is thinking that, for instance, I'm a king, or I'm this, or I'm that, and they really identify with it very, very, very strongly. More strongly than can even be put into words. It's the basis of their existence. They know nothing outside of that. There's no conception that there even could be anything outside of that. So when a person leaves the body, it's a very traumatic kind of experience. And even after leaving the body, even after seeing the body there lying in front of oneself, one's floating around in the subtle body composed of mind, intelligence, and yes, that false ego. Even after seeing the body there dead in front of him, he still is thinking, how can I be close to this body? How can I be close to the relatives of this body? How can I still try to enjoy this body and the things in relation to it? So Suyagnya Maharaj, Prabhupada is describing, was attached in this way. And so even after he left, he was hovering around this scene, seeing his family, and you can imagine it's actually quite a traumatic thing to see yourself dead and to see all your relatives there crying, all of your loved ones crying, and you feel that there's some obligation to stay in that place, some obligation to try to pacify them, to make some attempt to try to remedy the situation. But when one is in their subtle body, they don't have a means to interact with hard matter. They just have desires, they have thoughts and things like this. But they can't actually externally affect the world in any kind of substantial way. So it's a very frustrating position. It's a very frustrating and depressing kind of position to be in. So for pious souls, Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, in order to bestow some mercy upon them, he appears before them, or he encourages them to just leave, to just go to your next body, just leave this situation, go to your next body, it'll be much better for you. And so that's what's happening here. And it's an indication of the very advanced system that Krishna has for universal management. It's actually a very effective system because it's a progressive one. Krishna's system for universal management is a progressive one in the sense that what we were hearing earlier in the first chapter, how when Parikshit Maharaj was inquiring from Shukadeva Goswami how the Supreme Lord is impartial, Shukadeva Goswami, in the course of that narration, he describes how time enhances sattva gun. Time enhances the mode of goodness. As time goes on an individual level, the mode of goodness actually becomes more prominent. Why? Because the system of karma and reincarnation favors those who are knowledgeable. It favors those who have knowledge because it views knowledge as valuable. The purpose of Krishna's system, the purpose of the system of universal management is ultimately elevation, is ultimately to guide one toward real knowledge. And so those who are knowledgeable are favored by that system, because by that knowledge, one has proper conduct, and when one has proper conduct, then he avoids sin, he avoids sinful activity, and by avoiding sinful activity, he avoids being covered, being further covered again and again, and he gradually elevates himself to higher stages of life. And so this principle permeates the Vedic literatures. The Vedic literature is for this purpose, for the purpose of gradually elevating one from where they are. And this also is prevalent within the Vedic social system. This is the guiding principle of the Vedic social system. Putting an emphasis or a value on knowledge. In Manusmriti, there's one chapter, one section called the Sources of Dharma, or the Sources of Knowledge of Dharma. And within that section, there's one particular, some few verses which are talking about the degrees of respect which different people are owed in relation to receiving knowledge from them. So it describes five. It describes that people are to be respected for five things, on the basis of wealth, on the basis of relation, on the basis of their family line, on the basis of age, on the basis of their actions, and on the basis of their learning. And it's described that these are progressively more emphasized. So learning is the highest one. And a few verses before that in Manusmriti, it describes how if you have a 10-year-old Brahmana and a 100-year-old Kshatriya, then they're to be seen as father and son. And the Brahmana of 10 years is to be seen as the father of the Kshatriya of 100 years. even though his age is 1/10 of his age. So, and we're seeing that here, that the wives of Suyagnya Maharaj are respecting Yamaraj even though he is in the form, of a boy who's much younger than them. This is because of his knowledge. And so, I guess I should clarify that idea of a Brahmana of 10 years being respected as the father of a Kshatriya of 100 years. It should be clarified that Brahmana means, there's one verse, Janmana jayate shudra, samskarad bhaved dvija, vedapatad bhaved vipra, brahmajanati ti brahmanaha. That everybody is born a Shudra. Everybody is born without knowledge. Everybody is born more or less in ignorance. But by samskar, by initiation, one can become twice born. By studying the Vedas, one can become a scholar. But only one who knows or who has Brahma Gyan, who has knowledge of spiritual reality, is to be understood to be a Brahmana. So, this is, emphasizing again the value of knowledge, the value of learning in Vedic society. And it's also stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nyasi Shudra Kene Noi, Jai Krishna Tattva Veta She Guru Hoy. That whether one is a Brahmana, whether one is a sannyasi, whether one is a Shudra, or whether one is a Shudra, doesn't matter. As long as one knows Krishna Tattva, the science of Krishna, or the truth about Krishna, then one is to be considered a guru. So that knowledge with which the Vedic system favors, or which the Vedic system values, is not just any kind of knowledge. It's Krishna Tattva, it's Brahma Gyan, it's knowledge of spirit, it's knowledge of Krishna and one's relationship with him. Because by this knowledge, by this understanding of Krishna Tattva, of the truth of Krishna, one understands all subsequent tattvas too. One understands Jiva Tattva, or the truth about the Jiva, or the soul. One understands Guru Tattva. One understands all these different things, because Krishna Tattva is the highest truth. So when one understands the highest truth, there's a verse about this in Bhagavad Gita actually. What is it? Sarvata samplutodike. Tavan sarveshu vede. What's the first line? Yavan artha udapane sarvata samplutodike. Tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanataha. That the purposes of a small well, so if you have a small one, you have a large well. The purposes of the small well can be served by the large well, because the large well contains all the water of the small well, and then some. So in a similar way, the learned brahmanas, those who know spiritual, those who have spiritual knowledge, can serve all of the purposes of the Vedas by their understanding of Krishna, by their highest understanding. So this knowledge of Krishna consciousness accomplishes everything. And on the flip side, a lack of this knowledge ruins everything. Because when one identifies with the body, or when one doesn't have knowledge of the separation or the distinction between the body and the soul, then one identifies with the pleasure and the pains of this body. But specifically what's being emphasized here is the pleasure of the body. The wives of the queens are lamenting for the dead body of the king. Why? Not because of any, super, you could say, spiritual or super deep reason, but because it was their husband. It was their husband, they loved their husband, and they're now thinking that my husband is gone and I can't enjoy his company anymore. So when one identifies with the body, with the pleasures of the body, then it's a downward spiral. It's stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsas Sangasteshu Bhajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kamat Krodha Vijayate Krodhat Bhavati Samoha Samohat smriti vibramaha smriti brahmshad buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. That it all begins with just meditating on the objects of the senses, or meditating or pondering how one can be pleased or how one can acquire pleasure. When one does that, dhyato vishayam pumsa sangasteshu bhajayate, then one becomes attached. And from this attachment, sangat sanjayate kama, one develops a very intense lust. This attachment thickens into an insatiable kind of lust. Sangat sanjayate kama, kamat krodha vijayate. But because the nature of lust is that it can't be satisfied, is that it's always ever increasing, then one becomes frustrated, one becomes angry. Because their lust is frustrated. Krodad bhavati sammoha. And then from this anger, one becomes bewildered. Sammohat smriti vibramaha. And from this bewilderment, then one's memory becomes shot. One can't remember what is and what isn't. One can't remember, for instance, what's worked in the past or what hasn't worked in the past. They're just thinking, I need to do this and I need to do anything in order to get it. Smriti brahmshad buddhinasho. And then when one's memory is lost, then their intelligence goes too. And when their intelligence is gone, then they just fall back into material existence in lower and lower species of life. So it's a downward spiral, and we see how even in our society now, this is going on. In the name of so many different things, in the name of for instance, now, this more recently, it's kind of started in the 70s and 80s, but now especially, the whole culture around, they say like LGBTQ this. So at first it was just about homosexuality and embracing, or not embracing, but I guess you could say accepting or normalizing homosexuality. But now what it's become is really just promoting sexual deviancy. I remember I was distributing books at a college in Colorado. Yeah, I think it was in Colorado. And anyway, they had all these pride flags. This one particular section, I don't know, I guess it was some club on campus. They had all these pride flags, and then they had a little plaque under the pride flags to describe what they were. And one of them, I was shocked actually. One of them was, it was the pride flag for, it said leather pride, which basically is those who have a sexual fascination or a sexual fetish, you could say, for leather, for men wearing leather or whatever. And I was thinking, this seems a little bit off topic. This doesn't seem exactly like, okay, fine, if people want to campaign for embracing or normalizing homosexuality or stopping the persecution of homosexuals or this or that, fine. But now this seems a little bit off topic. This doesn't seem like it's exactly the same thing. And there were other things like that, other things which were just blatantly kind of sexual fetishes. And so, yeah, we see in practically speaking, in modern societies, this, you can, if you study the Roman Empire also, as people get comfortable or as people become acclimated to various kinds of sinful activity, it just keeps going. It just keeps going on and on and on and on until what? Until the society collapses. The more people become lusty, the more people's intelligence becomes degraded, and the less of a chance their society has a chance of surviving. So Prabhupada also specifically mentions this in relation to abortion in this purport. Now, abortion, Prabhupada mentions in different places, is extremely sinful. And especially in the sixth canto, this comes up. Prabhupada mentions in her purport how this child killing, Prabhupada mentions in relation to Maharaj Chittiketu, how the wives of Maharaj Chittiketu killed his child, how it used to be very rare, but now it's very widespread. It's become very accepted. But it's very sinful, because we accept that actually it's not, the child in the womb is not just like a tumor, but it's actually life. It's actually a living being in which there is a soul. And so the result of this is that there is sinful reaction. The result of sinful activity is that there's sinful reaction, and people's intelligence becomes more and more covered. And this only results in suffering. It results in people becoming more and more ignorant, and people suffering more and more. And so the ultimate result of the bodily concept of life is not good. That's the emphasis in this chapter, and that's the emphasis in the Vedic literatures in general. Like it's stated in this verse, Yamaraj is saying that hundreds of people and thousands of people have taken birth and then died. But the people who are still around don't understand that they are also apt to die. They don't understand that their body is also temporary. So to base one's happiness, to base one's existence on that which is temporary is a surefire way to guarantee that your happiness is also temporary. And so the wives of Suyagya are being enjoined by Yamaraj to focus on the higher principle, which is that everything is under the control of the Supreme Lord, and that we are meant to serve Him. And this understanding is practically more than half the battle of being liberated from this material world. If we engage in Krishna, this is called sambandha gyan, or knowledge of one's relationship with the world and knowledge of one's relationship with Krishna. And so if we engage with this, if we engage in Krishna consciousness with this realized understanding, then the anartha nivritti stage of our Krishna consciousness will be very short, be very not so significant. It's stated in Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, Janmaishvarya Shruta Shribir Edamanamadav Puman Naivarhatya Vidatam Vaitvama Kinchana Gocharam. That one who is attached to their birth, attached to their opulence, to their learning, and all these things, then they cannot address the Supreme Lord feelingly. Why? Because they're still identified with those things which are keeping them separate from Krishna. So when one understands that this body and the things in relation to it actually have nothing to do with me, and that the only thing that actually does have something to do with me is Krishna, then one has impetus, or one has motivation to address the Supreme Lord feelingly, to call out to the Supreme Lord feelingly. And this is confirmed in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Harinam Chintamani, wherein he states through this conversation between Haridas Thakur and Lord Chaitanya, that the remedy for namabhas, the remedy for incomplete, or you could say not fully developed chanting of the holy name, the remedy for this is to understand sambandha gyan, to have realized sambandha gyan. Because it's a great motivation, or I guess you could say, without understanding the goal of the process, or the goal of any particular process, of any particular action, it becomes very difficult to engage in that action. Why? Because you don't have a reason to. Humans and living entities in general are purpose-driven. They do things for a reason, even animals. So human beings, they want to do something for a particular reason. And sense gratification or material activity seems to have a very clear reason, or a clear purpose, namely to mitigate distress and to increase pleasure. But spiritual activity for a conditioned soul seems to have less of an immediate relevance in the sense that the living entity has not identified himself as a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna, and is therefore doesn't see the relevance of rekindling or reuniting with Krishna. So, therefore, those souls who have realized this knowledge, who have realized that they are actually souls, that they are actually part and parcel of Krishna and his eternal servants, the process of Krishna consciousness is quite easy. The process of Krishna consciousness is natural, and it feels unnatural to do anything else. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Harinam Chintamani, he describes also how to realize that. And it's described that one has to serve those, or one who has to associate with those who have themselves realized it. One has to specifically serve a guru, to surrender to a person who has realized this knowledge. And this is a very important point, and one that is mentioned all over the Vedic literatures. But especially in relation to bhaktas, and especially in relation to not just any bhaktas, but us, those bhaktas who have come from grossly sinful backgrounds, have to follow the orders of the Acharya very rigidly, because we're in a very special position. Actually, the type of bhakti that is presented in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this direct engagement in bhakti, is actually an exceptional kind of engagement in bhakti. Generally speaking, one has to, or you could say like the ancient Vedic system would be that one has to engage in karma, sadhana, and then when one is free from sin, which means varnashram, and then when one is free from sin and has gone through being a brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi, well, sannyasi only for brahmanas, but yeah, and then a brahmana, brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, and shudra. One has to go through all the ashramans, one has to go through all the varnas. And then when one is a brahmana, then one has to take sannyas. And then when one is free from sin and has taken sannyas, then one can engage in jnana sadhana. Only then can one, so people now, they talk so much about, it's all one, or, people talk, we follow Shankara, this and that. Actually, there's no point in even speaking about it, because you have to be a brahmana and you have to be a sannyasi. And brahmana means you have to be a born brahmana, according to their system. So, then after that, then you have to engage in this very rigorous process of jnana sadhana, which culminates then in yoga sadhana. And actually, this is in their philosophy. They actually know that they're going to have to engage in yoga sadhana. And then the culmination of yoga sadhana culminates ultimately in worship of Vishnu, or meditation on Paramatma, which then leads one into bhakti. And so this system is there in the Vedas, because by the time one gets to bhakti, one is so incredibly pious that it's very unlikely that he'll commit offenses to the Supreme Lord, which are extremely grave. To commit offenses to Krishna, or to commit offenses to the Supreme Lord while engaging in the process of devotional service, is extremely grave, and it's the cause of one to fall down. And so if one commits offenses after following that whole process, where do they fall back down to? They fall down to yoga, or they fall down into, for instance, you see sometimes, devotees they're so pious, I have one godbrother named Chittahari Prabhu, who's, he's a brahmachari in Salem. And my Guru Maharaj was giving a class specifically on karma, and wasting time and getting caught up in karma, all these different things. And this devotee, Chittahari Prabhu, was speaking to one other devotee, and he was saying, he's a Tamil devotee, Indian devotee. He was saying, I was so sinful. He said, I was such a sinful person. He was lamenting after the class, speaking to one devotee. I was such a sinful person. This devotee asks him, he goes, what are you talking about? You're Tamil, you're born in a Brahmana family, you never, how were you so sinful? He's like, I wasted so much time. He's saying, how, what? He said, I used to play soccer. He said, I spent so much time playing soccer, So, this is the degree of piety that one has, they don't fall down into illicit sex, they may have some thought about only their wife or something like that, But for those who are coming from a grossly sinful background, directly engaging in devotional service, It's like, for instance, if you jump from, 6th grade, and then you get a special pass from the government that you can go to 10th grade. You're not exactly in the same position as one who's gone through 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, and then 10th grade. Because if you misbehave in that class, then you go all the way back to 6th grade. If somebody misbehaves or somebody doesn't, function properly in 10th grade, then okay, they go back to 9th grade. But for us, if we don't properly engage in devotional service on the order of the Acharya, we fall down into animal life. We fall down into grossly sinful activity. Our Maya is not the same necessarily as the Maya of somebody who's, engaged in all these extremely pious activities in their previous lives. So, by following the order of the Acharya very, very rigidly and engaging in the process of devotional service with realized Sambandha Gyan from that Acharya, then there will be very little lamentation. There will be very little suffering as a result of the bodily concept of life, because it just won't be there. The bodily concept of life just won't be there. And so, so we should know the goal, we should know the process, and we should, follow the process very strictly so as to not end up like the wives of Suyagya, or as to not end up as Hiranyakashipu, or Suyagya himself, lying there and hovering as a ghost. So, I'll stop there if there's any discussion. Or if there isn't, that's okay. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you for the class. What is essence of our practice? What method how to awake our soul?
What is the essence of our practice?
What's the main method?
The main method? Well, the main method is chanting the holy name of the Lord, as given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's the main method. As I mentioned, when one has realized Sambandha Gyan, then this becomes facilitated, because one's Anartha Nivritti stage, or their Nama Bas stage, becomes very short, because they're free from offenses. So realizing Sambandha Gyan and realizing one's relationship with Krishna helps one to chant the holy name. Why? Because they can chant it feelingly. They can chant it with conviction, which is the way that it is meant to be chanted. Prabhupada translated the Hare Krishna Mahamantra as, "O Krishna, O energy of Krishna, please engage me in your service." So it's a prayer. So when one knows who they are, and when one knows who Krishna is, and when one realizes their fallen position in relation to him, then they can pray feelingly, and their chanting of the holy name becomes greatly facilitated. Is that okay? Anything more? Yes.
Go ahead. Are there any other difference between someone who is aspiring to realize Sambandha Gyan and somebody who has realized besides making offenses?
Well, their whole outlook on the world, their whole worldview is pretty decidedly different. Because one who is aspiring to realize Sambandha Gyan means they haven't realized Sambandha Gyan. They're still seeing themselves as the body. One devotee in Mayapur, I was listening to, it was Bhakti Vidyapurna Swami, which, not generally, I guess, seen as an authority anymore, but, and maybe rightfully so. But anyway, he was giving a deity worship seminar, and one thing he said stuck out to me, which I thought was nice. He said that the reason you see the deity as stone is because you see yourself as flesh. The reason you think that the deity is just a statue is because you think you're your body. So one who has realized Sambandha Gyan, one who has factually realized themselves to be separate from the body, and for them to they're a servant of Krishna, the whole process of devotional service is different. They see it differently. They don't just see it as, that's basically the beginning of raga bhakti. It's the beginning of actual spontaneous devotional service. And is when one realizes that when one becomes free from anarthas, then they develop a particular kind of attraction to Krishna. They develop rati. They develop a particular flavor of it, or they become attracted to a particular flavor of relationship with Krishna. And then this develops and eventually matures into prema. So yeah, the stage of actual realized sambandhi gyan is a very high one. But and so yeah, when one realizes that the whole process of Krishna consciousness becomes very different, actually. Is that okay? Anything more?
Just one. If you allow me, one comment. You quoted that verse from Queen Kunti's prayers, which is very essential, and thank you for quoting the revised translation, which is actually what Prabhupada wrote instead of So it seems like that is one of the advantages of being in the Kali Yuga. There's this verse that right after, very close to after the verse in the 11th canto describing Lord Chaitanya as the avatar of the age, where it says Kaling Sabaji Antyaya Guna Gyasara Bhagana Yata Sankitanaya Sarvasvarto Bilabhide. That those who are wise, they worship this Kali Yuga because Lord Chaitanya appeared. And because in this age, just the Sankirtan movement alone is sufficient to attain all the svartas. And one of the advantages of being in this age is that things are so obviously horrendous that if you get the association of a pure devotee, or even those who are trying to be pure, who are following a pure devotee, you can be drawn in to even before you know anything, to practice the chant. And as soon as you do that with a little sincerity, and also here, then you can understand what a dangerous position, what a lowly position you're in. And in that mood, it's easier to be Trinadapi Sunichena. It's easy to see oneself as lower than and needing of help, and therefore to call out with great desperation. Whereas if you're born in other age, I'm Brahman, this I have somebody, then you really have a lot of more false ego to, So in that sense, there's an advantage in the Kali Yuga, but we have to take advantage of calling out with deep sincerity.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything more? Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
I have a question.
Okay.
May I?
You may.
Yes, Amogha Prabhu, thank you very much. You're most kind. Dandavat pranams.
Oh.
Prabhu, you know better than me that we have 3 developing stages. You mentioned Sambandha, but then after Sambandha comes Abhideya, no?
Yes.
And then the most perfect is Prayojana.
Mm-hmm.
And you also know better than me that we have 9 developing stages related to the process of bhakti, beginning with faith and ending with prema.
Yes.
So my question is, is it that it is possible to harmonize both situations, the process of which includes Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, and the 9 stages. Is it possible do you see any harmony between both?
Yes. Yes, I do. So Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana are more talking about philosophical principles. It's not necessarily talking about a process, although inherently in there is a process, because Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, they're kind of progressively, higher stages of realization. But when we talk about those things, we're more just talking about the philosophical principles of our lineage. Whereas the ladder from faith to prema is actually talking about the different stages of realization within Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Because, for instance, chanting the holy name, although we may have a theoretical understanding of Sambandha, we haven't realized Sambandha. But how do we realize Sambandha? We realize Sambandha through Abhideya. And then once we realize Sambandha through Abhideya, then we get Prayojana, then we achieve Prayojana eventually. So it's not necessarily, again, although inherently in there is a bit of a process because those are progressively higher philosophical principles, we're not necessarily talking about an actual process, whereas this Adosha, Dattata, Sadhu, Sangha, etc., is actually how it progresses, that on an individual level, how Krishna consciousness looks as one makes advancement. Is that okay?
Yes, that is okay. And I asked this question because you repeated yourself related to the concept of when someone becomes accomplished in the Sambandha stage. You said that for it to become more easy, related to walking the path of becoming Krishna conscious, unless we become accomplished in the Sambandha stage, it becomes much more difficult. Mm-hmm. So I would like to know, related to the nine stages, which is the stage where we would find ourselves already accomplished related to the Sambandha principle?
My understanding is that is rati, is when you get to you realize Sambandha Gyan, and then after you realize Sambandha Gyan, then you develop rati from there. Once you're fully realize that you are a servant of Krishna, then that stage matures into rati.
Yes, now you gave me the answer. Thank you very much. Hare
Wonderful.
Krishna.
Jai Hare Krishna. Yes, Jagatara. Huh? The reference is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings to Rupa Goswami, which I can show you. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai.